Donald Trump, in response to escalating tensions and growing public outcry over aggressive federal immigration raids, has ordered the deployment of 2,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles. The decision comes after 2 consecutive days of intense clashes between demonstrators and federal officers, particularly in the predominantly Latino neighborhood of Paramount. The unrest was triggered by a series of raids carried out by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, targeting undocumented immigrants. On Friday alone, 44 people were taken into custody, bringing the total number of arrests in the city this week to 118. The operations have drawn strong criticism from state officials, with California Governor Gavin Newsom denouncing the raids as cruel and counterproductive. Earlier on Saturday, federal agents used tear gas to disperse crowds protesting what they described as racially motivated and inhumane enforcement tactics. The protests, which began peacefully, turned chaotic as tensions flared between residents and ICE personnel. President Trump, addressing the situation through his social media platform Truth Social, blamed Democratic leaders in California for the unrest. He accused both Governor Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass of incompetence and declared that if local officials failed to restore order, the federal government would step in and solve the problem, referencing what he called riots and looters. Despite the announcement of a National Guard deployment, reports from the ground late Saturday indicated that the troops had not yet arrived in the city. However, federal sources suggested they would be on the ground within 24 hours. Governor Newsom strongly opposed a federal intervention, calling it a deliberate escalation and warning that such actions would only deepen existing divisions. His office emphasized that the president had bypassed standard protocol, using a rarely invoked authority to federalize the National Guard, a power usually reserved for the state's executive. Further intensifying the situation, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stated that active-duty Marines stationed at Camp Pendleton were on high alert and could be mobilized if violence continued. Governor Newsom condemned the statement as deranged behavior, raising alarms about the increasing militarization of domestic law enforcement efforts. The confrontation in Los Angeles is emblematic of a broader national debate over immigration policy, federal authority, and the limits of presidential power. As the city braces for potential further unrest, questions remain over whether the presence of military forces will calm tensions or inflame them further. While calm appeared to be returned to parts of Los Angeles by late Saturday evening, the situation in the Paramount district remained volatile, with sporadic confrontations continuing between demonstrators and law enforcement officers. The neighborhood, which has been at the epicenter of recent protests against federal immigration raids, was still engulfed in smoke and the lingering effects of tear gas. Near a Home Depot store, where the protests initially broke out earlier in the week, law enforcement efforts to disperse crowds continued into the night. L.A. County Sheriff's deputies deployed flashbang grenades and rounds of tear gas at frequent intervals to push back groups of protesters who had refused to leave the area. Witnesses described a scene filled with confusion and fear. Local residents and demonstrators reported that many undocumented immigrants had locked themselves inside nearby businesses and homes, too frightened to emerge amid the chaos. With over 80% of Paramount's population identifying as Hispanic or Latino, tensions have been particularly high in the wake of the sweeping ICE operations that many in the community perceive as discriminatory and aggressive. The White House issued a statement attributing the unrest to what it called violent mobs targeting federal agents engaged in lawful deportation procedures. It blamed California's Democratic leadership for what it characterized as a failure to maintain public order. The statement went on to justify President Trump's decision to sign a presidential memorandum authorizing the deployment of 2,000 National Guard troops to the region, emphasizing the administration's commitment to restoring law and order. Tom Homan, the administration's senior advisor on border enforcement, often referred to as Trump's border czar, arrived in Los Angeles over the weekend to directly oversee ongoing ICE operations. Speaking from the field, Homan declared that the federal government would adopt a zero-tolerance stance toward any violence, vandalism, or threats to public safety. Echoing that sentiment, FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino took to social media to deliver a blunt warning to demonstrators. You bring chaos, and we'll bring handcuffs. Law and order will prevail. His message reinforced the federal government's hardline position amid growing criticism from civil rights advocates and local leaders. Governor Gavin Newsom responded to the escalating federal presence by accusing the administration of intentionally provoking a crisis. In a public address, he cautioned protesters against engaging in behavior that could be used to justify further militarization. "They want a spectacle," Newsom said. "Let's not give them one." In a prior statement issued Friday, the governor criticized the federal immigration sweeps as reckless and unnecessary, calling them an effort to fulfill arbitrary arrest quotas rather than address legitimate public safety concerns. He described the operations as both dangerous and inhumane. Mayor Karen Bass also condemned the federal response, accusing ICE agents of instilling fear across Los Angeles communities. "This isn't immigration enforcement. It's terrorizing families," she said. Immigrant rights groups have rallied behind the city's Latino residents. At a recent protest, Angelica Salas, the executive director of the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, voiced the deep concerns of many in the community. "Our neighborhoods are under siege," she said. "These are working families. These are parents, providers, and community members. What's happening here is unacceptable and must end." As federal authorities prepare for a sustained presence in Los Angeles, and as active duty troops remain on standby, the city faces an uncertain path forward. Residents are left grappling not only with the immediate impact of the raids, but also with broader fears about civil liberties, community trust, and the future of immigration policy in America.